Shep Gordon, Alice Cooper's manager, decided to enter the film industry forming It's Alive. The company initially tried more dramatic work, but didn't find a ton of success. Gordon turned to the home video market and noticed that horror tapes sold more than anything, especially when the names John Carpenter or Wes Craven were on the cover. Craven approached both directors with a two-picture deal. They would be low-budget horror films distributed by Universal. Their names would go above the titles, and they would have complete creative autonomy. Both said yes. Carpenter made Prince of Darkness, and They Live. Craven's first film for It's Alive was Shocker, released on October 27, 1989. The film was about a young psychic named Jonathan. A local serial killer murders Jonathan's foster mother and siblings. Jonathan's foster father is the lead detective on the case. Using his psychic abilities, Jonathan is able to identify the killer as Horace Pinker, a local TV repairman. Pinker kills Jonathan's girlfriend, Allison, in retaliation. Jonathan is then able to lead the police to Pinker before he can kill again. Pinker is arrested and given the electric chair. However, with the help of magic, Pinker becomes a phantom using electricity to possess different bodies. Pinker then uses his new abilities to put himself into TV signals. Jonathan, with the help of Allison's ghost, is also able to harness the same kind of magic and fights Pinker. Ultimately, Jonathan is able to trap Pinker in the TV world as his best friend Rhino takes out the signal, seemingly killing Pinker. That was a hard movie to summarize. As you can tell, this is a weird one. And weird is good, to an extent. The movie is certainly unique, even though it is very apparent what Craven was trying to do here. One of the most frustrating things about working in Hollywood as a creator is that you don't own your own work. Someone else does. I think Craven was a little bitter that, creatively and financially, Freddy Krueger was taken away from him. Shocker was an attempt to create a new Freddy Krueger, one that Craven had more stake in. And it is very similar, but it's not nearly as strong or cohesive. There don't seem to be any rules. I'm not even sure what's going on in certain scenes. Elm Street had a clear, easy to understand set of rules. Shocker does not. It's magic, so anything can happen. I don't know what exactly Pinker does to make himself Electro. It's some kind of spell, but his interest in voodoo isn't set up at all. And then Allison shows up as a ghost with a magic necklace, and it's just, what is happening? Even conceptually, Shocker isn't as strong as Elm Street. The basic premise of Elm Street is so much more engaging and scary. You have to sleep and dream. Freddy is inescapable. With Pinker, shut off the TV, cut the power. He's not that hard to beat, and the solution is obvious, which kills a lot of the tension. I will also say that the script is one of Craven's clumsiest. The dialogue is off in a lot of places, some of it charmingly so and intentionally. The movie has a cool, surreal tone, but man, the exposition with Allison is so bad. That weird contrived thing where he gives himself a concussion and temporarily forgets his girlfriend, so she awkwardly explains who she is to the audience. That same information could have been between Jonathan and Rhino. Jonathan could have said, "You look like you've been up all night with Allison." Jonathan responds with his remark about not sleeping well, setting up his dreams. Rhino would then point out that the couple has been together for a year and doesn't believe that they haven't slept together, and then that would lead to Jonathan's crack about wanting to be respected as a person first. So it's still an exposition dump, but a little more natural. Structurally, the movie is also weird. The three acts are essentially three different movies. The first is focused on a boy with psychic powers using his abilities to catch serial killers because that was the premise of a TV show Craven wanted to do, but it didn't get picked up. The second is a body switching thing because Craven liked the original thing and wanted to do something similar. And then the final act is the weird TV thing. The three aren't well blended together, and the movie ends up feeling a little jumbled and oddly paced. Thematically, the movie is not as cohesive as other Craven projects. Obviously, there's some kind of commentary on television, but I couldn't tell you what it is. We, as a society, do over-rely on technology, and that problem has only gotten worse over the years. But nothing is really done with tech. Pinker just uses TVs for the most part, and there's no commentary on our overconsumption of TV. There are moments where irresponsible journalism is showcased, but that's about it. Another idea the movie tries to present is about willpower. At the movie's start, Jonathan has potential greatness, but doesn't have the will to win. That never comes into play for Jonathan. The wills of the coach and Jonathan's father are tested, but never Jonathan. He should have been possessed by Pinker at some point and have to fight him out. Why is the conclusion of that through line suddenly about Jonathan's dad? How is it satisfying for Jonathan's dad to be the one that fights Pinker off? That's super weird. The one thematic element that really works is love. The point that Craven is trying to make, as he has since Last House on the Left, is that violence doesn't solve anything. Jonathan and his father fight Horace Pinker with as much hate as they can muster, and it only makes things worse. They find themselves in a cycle of horrific violence. Then there's the obvious commentary on the death penalty. Ultimately, Jonathan has to end the cycle. He fights with love, not hate. That's why his most effective weapon is a heart. He throws the knife away. His love for Allison, his family, and his friends is what allows him to win.
That's how we're gonna win. Not fighting what we hate. Saving what we love.
And that's why Jonathan being Pinker's son works. I don't think I mentioned that in the summary. Pinker claims that he is Jonathan's biological father. It's left ambiguous in the movie whether or not that's true, but Craven said that Pinker is Jonathan's birth father. Jonathan has that same hate and rage, as Pinker points out, but ultimately he chooses a different path. It's really good stuff. I love the optimism of that. Craven was always about confronting and exploring the dark, but rising above it. And that works as a transition to the positives. You might be thinking from all my complaining about it that I don't like Shocker, but plot twist, I fucking love this movie. If you've seen anything else on my channel, you'll know that I'm a massive Kiss fan. So the movie immediately wins me over with the theme song that features Paul Stanley singing. That song is awesome. As I mentioned, Gordon is Alice Cooper's manager, so there are a lot of music connections. The soundtrack is all metal and rock. Another Kiss connection is the song Sword and Stone. Paul and Bruce Kulick wrote that track for Kiss's 1987 album Crazy Nights, but the producer Ron Nevison rejected it. I do wish Kiss had actually performed it for the movie. A band called Bonfire did it instead. Alice Cooper's guitarist at the time, Kane Roberts, cameos as the buff construction worker, and footage of Alice in concert is shown throughout the film. He also sings on the soundtrack, and Megadeth covers No More Mr. Nice Guy. The soundtrack also features a ballad that Desmond Child included in the hope that it would get Shocker a nomination for Best Original Song at the Oscars. That didn't happen, but it's a great soundtrack and a fun part of the movie. I mentioned how weird this movie is, and I love when Craven gets weird and no one is telling him no. As flawed as the script is, the movie is so much fun. It's really engrossing, and Craven still manages to give it weight. It's genuinely sad when any character dies. The scene where Jonathan comes home to find Allison dead in the bathtub is really good, and when the coach kills himself to save Jonathan. These are all really charming, likable characters that you get invested in, and you feel Jonathan's pain when they die. The MVP is Rhino, played by Richard Brooks. We all deserve a friend like Rhino. He's so supportive. Whenever Jonathan comes to him with this bizarre nonsense, Rhino's always like, "That's weird, and you're clearly nuts, but I got your back, bro." It's a pretty one-sided friendship, though. Jonathan isn't nearly as supportive. Rhino only exists to Jonathan when he needs him for something. Rhino deserves better. And again, I don't understand a lot of what is going on half the time, but I'm into it. It's a blast to watch. I think this is a great pizza and beer movie that you can watch with a group of friends. Jack Hatkin was the director of photography as he was on the original Nightmare on Elm Street. And I'm super happy about that because he and Craven are a great team. The movie looks amazing. I love the style and tone. It's a wonderful movie to put on just for the atmosphere. Shocker's budget was around $10 million. I think it was initially lower, but something went wrong with the special effects, and they had to be done last minute at a higher cost. The movie ended up only making $16.6 million. And if you're unaware, a movie traditionally needs to double the production budget to break even. So theatrically, Shocker lost money. I would be curious to know what it made in VHS sales since that was the intended audience anyway. Regardless, it can't have been that much since no sequels were ever made, despite the obvious intention for this to be a series. The film was also not favorably reviewed, with critics pointing out the wonky structure and lack of rules, as well as the dipshits who hated the movie and called Craven a bunch of awful names because a young girl dropped the F bomb in the movie. As an attempt to recapture Nightmare on Elm Street, the movie fails. It's not nearly as tight, both in terms of structure and theme. It's not as universal, and the spark of originality isn't there. Elm Street was Craven at a peak of creativity. Shocker feels more like an attempt to recapture that, but doesn't quite get there. But as I said, despite all of my problems with it, I love the movie. The characters, atmosphere, cinematography, music, and optimistic theme all connect with me in a big way. You can love something and still evaluate its flaws.